the oil or the wine. I've read that hundreds of times. Have you read it hundreds of times? Can you explain it to me, please? Do we have an accepted explanation for this? Is there a lot of things we can learn still? Or do we know it all already? There's a lot to learn, right? Sister White said when we study Daniel and Revelation, there will be a revival happening in our church. Is there a lot of people studying Daniel and Revelation today? Are we learning new things? Absolutely. I'm thrilled by all the little pieces. I read everything I can grasp, and I'm not an expert on Daniel and Revelation, but I'll tell you what, I love reading Daniel and Revelation, and the more I read, I learn a little bit here, and I read what somebody else, and pretty soon there's a growing, beautiful knowledge coming out of Daniel and Revelation, specifically designed to prepare you for the last final conflict. God is preparing His people, and He's revealing to them. It says, the wise will understand, and they will teach many, Daniel says. Well, I want to understand. Well, I said, Lord, I've read this a lot of times. I don't understand what's going on here. What does it mean? God Himself is saying, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley, and see you hurt not the oil or the wine. Just before that, we're talking about a judgment process. Could this be part of that judgment process? It has to be. It's part of the same horse. Correct? That's what God is doing. He's judging. So this is a judgment, a declaration of judgment. But what does that mean? And suddenly I saw that lady in my mind's eye. I saw the lady holding up, in this case God, holding up a pair of balances. And on one side I saw a measure of wheat, and on the other side I saw 3 measures of barley. Oh, the world is divided into 2 groups, correct, in the last final judgment? Is this correct? There's only 2 groups in the last final judgment. And here we have a final judgment process, and there's only 2 groups. We have 1 measure on one side and 3 measures on the other. So I went to the to the Bible commentary, and I started looking up, and I found that wheat is a symbol of God's righteous, the wheat and the tares, and that barley is a common. Now, the wheat, the 5 loaves and barley loaves, they were made out of barley, and barley sometimes is used as a good thing, but generally, as opposed to wheat, barley is a cheaper, lower grade food. A common food is what the commentary said. And the common is not associated with God, correct? The word common is not something that God associates with, but you are a peculiar people, not a common people, and a holy nation. And so, if you have 2 groups of people, you have 1 wheat, 1 measure, a little pile on the one side, and on the other side you have 3 measures. Now, the first thing that I saw in this, I said, well, if that's true, there's only 2 groups of people in the world. Could it be that 1/4 of the earth's population at that time will accept the message? I'm not saying that's what it says. I'm saying this is one of the things that I immediately saw that could be a possibility. It could be that the loud cry goes out, and we don't realize what a great harvest is going to be. If you look and you read the Great Controversy, Sister White says, the success of the work infuriates the enemies. Why? Because it's so successful. People are responding to the loud cry left and right. Nothing can stop them. Family relations, work relations, nothing can stop them. They accept the gospel. And here is a possible measure of how big it's going to be. It could be that up to 1/4 of the entire world listens and accepts. Now we're talking something thrilling. We thought about finishing the work. Have you ever heard of the word finishing the work? This is a thrilling finishing of the work. It could be more than 1 billion people. Absolutely. All of a sudden I began to understand this last final grandeur of the work that God has given. The loud cry goes out. Every single person must hear the message, and people respond. And it looks like the final judgment ends up in 1/4 of the earth's population accepting the message. Now, we may find out that it's symbolic of a great group, or we may find out it's literal. We'll find out in the future. We don't know right now. But all I know is all of a sudden I'm beginning to understand how big the last final closing work is going to be. And then I read, see you hurt not the oil or the wine. Oh, is somebody about to get hurt? Why does God say, don't hurt the oil or the wine? Who's about to get hurt? Have you ever asked yourself a question? Sister White says, and I saw the living saints, 144,000 in number, Remember that phrase? What happened to the rest of the saints? Well, there's only 144,000 living saints. Whether that's literal or symbolic, we will know again someday. It sounds literal. But on the other hand, it's not a very big number of people. What happens to all those that respond to the loud cry? I mean, we don't like to talk about it. Sister White said most of the time, when we think of the future and expectation, our expectations are worse than reality. But in this particular case, our expectations do not come up to the reality of the terribleness of the crisis that's about to happen. That's not the word for word that she says, but that's the thought. It's going to be worse than we think. Isn't that what she's saying? Is this biblical? Is the spirit of prophecy back this up? Somebody's about to get hurt, and God says, but don't touch the oil or the wine. I looked it up in the commentary, and the oil and the wine signify the Holy Spirit and the righteousness of Christ. There is a group that's not going to be touched during this time. It's 144,000. Those that are sealed by the Holy Spirit to the righteousness of Christ. And God shows a great harvest taking place. And then he says, but don't touch this small group of people that are sealed by the Holy Spirit. Now, when I read that, I had not finished reading the rest of it. But I was stunned. I just sat there, Lord, a massive harvest. And suddenly, something is about to hurt the harvest. Let's continue reading. Verse 8. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death, and hell followed after him. And power was given unto him. There you got it again. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. In the historical context, this signifies the persecution of God's people during the Middle Ages. But what about the future context? The fourth part of the earth. Didn't we just finish saying that the great harvest would be a fourth part of the earth? Did we just look at that possibility? And God said, but don't hurt a particular small group of people, because the rest of them are about to get hurt. There's a great harvest about to happen, and if you look at this in context, you can see that it matches perfectly what we just finished reading in the previous. This is not God writing this, because God doesn't have a name of death and hell. Now, this hell means Hades. It means the grave. In other words, it's another name for death and a grave. And death sat on a horse, and the grave followed after him, and power was given unto him. Authority, permission was given unto him to kill 1/4 part of the earth. We just finished saying that 1/4 part of the earth accepts the gospel. Isn't that what we just looked at? Do they have to die? Can't they be translated? Is everybody, are you ready for translation right now? Are you an Enoch? Are you an Elijah right now? Huh? Y'all are like silence. What is this? I'm not an Elijah. I'm not ready. Are you ready? You have no sins in your life. You can be translated right now? Is that what you're saying? When I look at myself, all I see is imperfection. Do you see the same thing in your life? Are we ready to be translated? No. Now, there might be some, but those that are ready would be the first to admit that they're weak, right? The moment you stand up and go, I'm ready for translation, guys, you're probably not going to be translated. Because God's people that are going to be translated are the first ones to tell you how dependent on God they are, because they see their weaknesses, right? We had some visitor come to our church in Illinois some years ago, and he made a statement from the pulpit. My wife and I, we are 98% perfect. Whoa! What does that mean? Out of 98 sins, they only commit 2. Out of 100 sins, they only commit 2? I don't know what they meant by that, but they figured out they were 98% perfect. That's a great imperfection when you make that statement. All I